All right, ready?
Yep.
Hey guys, what's going on? Back here with episode 5 of 5 and 5 here with Deemer Class. I am Matt Dunn, and this week we have a new feature. Actually, we're going to go 5 clips, 5 topics for 5 minutes. So we're going to add in a little game here where Deemer and I go back and forth, break down these clips. We're going to keep it within a 1-minute window here and see how well we can explain these clips back and forth. Deemer, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Excited for our new variation, just trying to keep the content fresh. We know there's a lot of great stuff out there for people, a lot of games to watch, a lot of stuff on YouTube. So, appreciate the listeners who've been with us every week.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, I think this has been fun for us, just trying to figure out the best way to play around and have some fun on here with breaking down the games and getting some good stuff out that's usable for everybody. I'm interested to see how this one goes right here. We were talking earlier; it's a little bit of like almost part of my take, beat the clock kind of vibe. I think it'll be fun for us, but I think hopefully we'll get us thinking a little faster and get some cool things out there.
Yeah, I think the cool thing too is, having, played for a while and, starting to go through these clips, I even find myself when I'm going through games, I'm almost like expecting and looking for certain things, and whether I want to clip them up, post a breakdown on them, or, just kind of see what happens and then kind of respond to it. Like my thoughts are always formulating pretty quickly. So it'll be fun to try and condense that. But it would be cool eventually to get to that point where we're just ripping off clips that we haven't even seen before and just kind of seeing what comes to mind.
Yeah, I think that's next. It's a good point. We were talking the last couple weeks, I think, I've watched a game or two and broken it down. There's been this like nice theme that's popped out for the games, and where like, I watched Maryland, Penn State, and Maryland was showing from X all the time. It was like easy to break that down. Ohio State was going zone against Hopkins. It's like, that's a cool concept to break down. And like this week I watched a couple of the games and there was nothing like major theme why I stuck out. I was like, I don't know if I can put together like an eight clip thread of a single game. So I was just like, I wonder if we could just do like quick 1-minute clips on like little things and see and get those like topics out as a cool way to start to cover some, like, like you said, different. You watch a clip and you're like, oh, that's a cool example of a check here. That's a cool, slide right there. Like, let's see if we can put together a quick breakdown on it.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah. All right.
So in this first clip here, we're going to be talking about the fish hook, and this is done in an example by Owen Hiltz. Owen's a freshman attackman from Culver Academy. He does a great job here of demonstrating a fish hook. This is something that I think is really hard to plan for, as defenders, and it's a high IQ savvy cut. I think you really have to be thinking about, timing this up and getting on the same page with your teammate, but it's really deceptive. You can see here, he starts to cut away, makes it look like he's going to cut opposite, and then does a nice fish hook, curls back to the ball. His stick's in his outside hand, so players need to set this up for their strength, right, or the outside hand, and then a quick catch finish in the half game. I thought this was a great way that Hiltz demonstrated the fish hook cut that young attackmen and young attackers can really learn from and implement into their games.
55 seconds.
Right on the money.
You had some time to spare there.
Take. There we go.
That was good. The fish hook, it's actually like a really savvy offensive play. And it's if you don't have it scouted and you don't know a team is about to fish hook and they run it well, where the guy does it subtly and the feeder is looking for it, it's almost impossible to defend. And you can see the deception here of the Syracuse guy just looking upfield and popping out real quick and the ball coming in. Like, as a defender, like, you're just not going to be sharp enough to defend that if you haven't seen it in film and aren't like ready to jump on it.
And I really like too that he does this off of a loose ball, and Rafis is a great feeder at X. He's flashing down to it right here. 88 covers him up. And then one of the keys, I think, too, is that you have to let this develop. Like, you have to he really turns his whole body. And right here, this easily looks like, he's going to try and pick away, cut away. He slows down. Then nice plant, creates a little space. So again, he's not cutting right back in the same spot. You really got to create that little pop, that little C-cut-esque motion, thinking about that fish hook. And notice all the separation he creates in just a couple steps, passes on the stick. And again, he's just open enough to get that nice shot off early in the game.
Yeah, I mean, just watching it right there, it kind of brings me back to my point. Like, A, he never switches to his right hand. Like, if I watch this game and I saw this in this game, I saw it in another game, and it's really fast in the heat of the moment. But seeing, 77 run up the field inside the stick in his left hand, you got to be thinking like, be ready for the fish, like be ready for them to pop back out, be ready for them to pop back out. Because if you fall asleep for half a second right there, like it happens so fast. And the ball is just like, put right on his ear. It's a quick touch and in the goal. It's a great play, but you usually see it a lot. Like it's impressive they did it off the loose ball actually from the hung game, because you see it a lot off the end line plays. A lot of teams have their little subtle plays off the end line where they do a hand signal, guy will run in and do the fish hook and I'll hit him. But you kind of do it that quickly. If you don't scout it, you really can't stop it.
Yeah, Matt, I'm trying to share here, the one you initially sent me, just to your point about, off the end line, getting that hand signal. This is Penn State Rutgers. Doesn't result in a goal, but right here, you see this little hand signal to indicate. And this is deep, right? This is 10 yards below goal line. And they really tie us up. He steps in a couple steps, quick curl, and that passes right on his ear. Maybe a little high, but he catches it, gets it out quick. Goalie makes a save, or it rings off the pipe. But again, you always have to be ready, to your point.
Yeah, and I mean, like that's like a quarterback throwing it out. He's like throwing that ball before he's broken out. And as an off-ball defender, you're not thinking like necessarily jump so far. Like that guy's not in a bad spot necessarily normal, because usually that's a spot where like you're pretty casual because it doesn't feel like there's a play happening. You have to slide or a guy's cutting hard. So you're standing right next to him. But if the guy pops a yard out and you put it on his outside shoulder, he's going to get it off before you get the check in anyways, unless you're like trained and wired to hop on that outside hand right away.
I'll give you another analogy too. And I think one of my teammates who's really good at it is Josh Byrne. But think about it the other way now. You mentioned the quarterback analogy. I played receiver in high school. Think about going for a ball where the corner's head is they're facing you, and they're simply trying to deflect the pass based on your reaction to catching the pass. And the more that you can just keep running and not make it obvious that the ball's about to land in your hands, like, and you later that you put up your hands up to catch the pass, their reaction to try and tip it because they can't see the ball is delayed. And so I remember like Josh Burns had some sick handles in practice and in the game for Chaos, where he's standing there kind of like with the stick by his side. And then at the last second, even when that ball is already in the air, then he puts his stick up and tries to snag it. And you've probably seen that a lot in box game too.
Yeah, well, that's why it's one of those things. Like I told you before this, like we would play. I think Syracuse did it in college, and UMBC did it, and it was one of those things where like if I was covering that guy going in, and I saw him start to run to the middle, I would have to start not just moving next to him. I would have to take a straight line and sprint towards his stick, because like if I follow his inside shoulder, the ball's going to pop out. He's going to catch it. And you almost have to be willing to take an interference call at times where like you read his eyes, and if his hands start to get close to coming up, you just chop down. And like, sure enough, if you trust your film and trust the scout, like the ball came in and like you get a call turnover because you check his arms down, the ball goes over his shoulder. But it's not one of those things where you can wait to see the pass. This is why, like, at these higher levels, like scouting your opponent's huge, because you're not going to just pick up on that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it's even interesting when you talk about the check call too. Like, we were talking about that recently, in women's lacrosse, having a similar call where you're not looking and finding the ball, but you can't check down. because of, an empty stick check and having that. So if there's a way to match sticks and, put your stick right on their stick to hopefully get some sort of deflection, I think that's kind of the best you can do on the women's side of things. So it's all interesting stuff. And the more these attackmen, as they're going throughout their seasons, develop chemistry, I think you're going to see more and more slickness like this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the women's game is not like, it's not that dissimilar from playing like really good inside players for the men's game, because if you don't get stick side against some of these really good inside handlers, even if you start, checking their arms and hands, like those guys still find ways to handle and finish it. So actually getting to that ball and stick side against inside players in men's, and with women's rules, like it just takes extra effort to get your hips over to that side.
Yeah, it's key for sure. All right,
You want to
awesome.
run through your second clip here?
Yeah, do the next one.
Yeah.
We'll get into it. So this one was cool, Matt. So, for our, listeners, if you're not a member of FCL Online, it's something that we highly recommend because we're putting a lot of different content on there. But one of the things that I love doing and definitely want to get you going with, too, is our office hours sessions. I actually did one this past week. I had players as young as 9 years old on there with, some pretty elite high school guys, watching. We probably had 15 clips of different ways to shoot around an approach. And so I'm excited to share 3 of them and 3 ways that we teach it right here.
Awesome. Timer's on.
All right, so in these clips, we're going to see 3 ways that we talk about shooting with an approach. So many times that defenders are approaching out to our hands from different angles, and we need to be able to leverage our multiple release points and our consistent releases to be able to take advantage. So if we rewind here, again, one of the 3 main ways that we talk about shooting around an approach is around, over an approach, and under an approach. This one right here is the most classic example from Vermont Syracuse, shooting around an approach. This is an underhanded release, avoiding, that approach check as he steps in 15 yards, bring it low to high, wrapping around the defender. The next one here is under an approach. Anthony DeMaio did a great job of sizing up his defender, flipping his hips, and shooting right under, where that defender is still top side, so that stick path's going underneath. And this last one here from UVA is going over the approach, where he's winding up and bringing it right over the top so that goalie has a nice natural screen.
Ooh. Close.
I think I might have been a couple seconds off. I wasted too much time with the dressing.
I think you could probably cut some time off the front. I don't think you might be able to cut some stuff off the front, because you got to do the good stuff like the last 45 seconds.
Yeah, too much window dressing there. That stuff, again, is stuff that, I got to kind of leave out there. I got to get to meat and potatoes here. I didn't get to talk about this one as much.
I don't really know when to start the timer, so I just kind of picked the point when you were going. We'll trim it up.
You went me under the fire right away. I was like, oh snap! I gotta get going here.
Yeah. You probably got 5 to 10 seconds to shave off there. I think this concept's really interesting because we would do drills in college defensively and a ton of approach work. And some of it was approaching guys tight enough that where they could shoot off the approach. Like you weren't sometimes you talk about approach work, like guys, outside the box, like approaching this, take something away and set up your dodge. But sometimes the approach is literally to take away a shot off the approach. So approaching through a shooting lane is a very, important concept. That's why we work on inside out approaches, or a lot of times it is inside out, but kind of through a shooting lane, especially in, man down scenarios or rotations going through the shooting lane. Playing indoor NLL at box, really big thing is shooting lanes is massive. It's honestly more important than covering the ball at times. Is that it's all a game of lanes and angles and a small net where you can just take up space and find lanes. It's huge. So all the approach work we do, a lot of it's so that you don't get too high and guys can take advantage and shoot under you. Or the most common one is around that first video you showed. The most common one is guys approach to straight up on a guy right here. and you pull off his hip, and then the goalie can't see it. And you screen the goalie, you don't really get a good lane there. Whereas if you're going to left, you go wide, or you force the guy to tuck it a little. Now you can at least play him.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I actually remember doing drills, and I don't know if you guys felt like this or not too, but I felt like a guy that we did a lot of prep for with this stuff was Chad Button for UNC,
Oh
and
yeah.
he was a pretty big stretch shooter for them. So I remember us really working on our approaches to him, but then also he had such a great face dodge that trying to deter the shot, but then be ready for the face dodge and then be ready to slide to that as well.
Yeah, things like that. Like at least the face dodge at least buys you time if you know the guy can pull it. So like, yeah, the first thing is you have to eliminate the first shot, but you want to break down and play both. But at least you can slide to it if not. And honestly, the interesting thing about pro lacrosse nowadays is if you're rotating to a guy that can shoot the two, and he's got to step down too, you'd almost rather force him to tuck in and beat you. Like it's a little interesting. I remember that was a big transition to me, college to pro, was every goal's worth the same in college. So if a guy's about to pull up from 15, like let him versus the face dodge of the goal. But in pro, it's like force him to tuck it at least. And at least he only gets one there if he's a guy that can shoot the two. And there's a good chance we can crash on it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And this was one I didn't get to talk about as much, but more so than even just shooting over the approach. I think to your point, Matt, some of the shots too that we were also talking about in our office hours, guys were actually stepping and being mindful of the approach so that they could use the approach as a screen. And
Yeah.
here, actually interesting too, as this shooter catches it, he gets a pretty big windup. And really, right here, his body language looks like he's about to drop it and go maybe like a low to high, but then he pulls it back over the top and uses that, direct screen, for an overhand. So again,
Yeah.
a guy can wind up and assess that approach if he has enough time and then shoot off of that. And that's pretty crafty.
Yeah, and this is like the inside approach. If you see where he's at right now, notice how the defender steps downfield and aligns with the UVA player's helmet and not with the head of his stick, right? Because that's the phrase "stick has eyes," right? The stick can see the goal when the body can't. You reach the stick around the player. So on your approaches, when you're thinking about shooting lanes, you actually want to think more about the player's stick path than lining up square on his body here. And then you break down the stick path lane. You want to be ready to move. If he face dodge, you want to be ready to, get your stick in his hands and move down the field. But your initial body position should be coming through that stick path to the cage, the shooting lane,
Yeah,
especially in so
absolutely.
tight.
Especially to the point here on the wing, when what your point about making a guy tuck it, if you can make this guy tuck it on the spot, well, he's going underneath. He has to commit to getting his stick back to the middle, or he's shooting a low angle alley shot, or just giving it up. So I think
Yeah.
the approach piece makes sense. As a shooter, every time you catch and wind up, just try and take a peek at that defender and see what you can do with your release point to maybe add in some deception or just avoid the stick, which I think is what happens in the first one here. If he's going, a little more sidearm, his stick might get more disrupted, but he actually shoots pretty cleanly underneath the stick head going low to high.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good point. It's subtle, right? But it's like those little things. Like as an offensive player, if you can figure out how to shoot off an approach, and as a defender, if you can, figure out how to approach effectively through shooting lanes, like you can really jam up guys in 6-on-6 rotations, transition, man up, man down. I mean, you watch some of the best man down defenses. They're never like squaring you up. They're always kind of in like even a good zone. They're kind of like half in that spot where like he's not covering me, but by the time I step in to shoot, like I'm sure you feel this, like you can never get like a clean release because the tip of your head's about to hit like the width of somebody's stick, or their like body's just about to be in that shooting lane.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I actually find it easier, like in that case, to then drop my hands and like hit them like on their side, because I feel like I can still get more of a follow through than if I'm coming straight overhand and my stick hits their helmet, it stops my release even earlier. So like you have to also judge, like that's when kids are like, hey, like when should I hitch? If you feel like the guy's too close to you and you're not going to be able to, to really follow through as much as you normally would, like that's
Right.
when a good
Yeah.
time to hitch and avoid that. Just because otherwise it might just be a crappy shot and then you're losing 15 miles an hour on it.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's a good point.
All right, we're putting you on the
All right.
clock, big.
Yeah. Give me a sec. Let me get set up. Uh, all right. You ready? Set. Let's roll. All right, my first topic here is going to be a skewer, and Dean, we're building off what we just talked about. We're going to talk about, it's kind of off an approach. So approaching with a skewer, so stick out in front, it's more of like a poke check. It's like you don't actually really even have to extend your arms. It's just leading with that stick and then finishing with hands rather than a slap. So we're going to look at the first clip here. Penn State versus Maryland. We'll see this hitch right here, but then just a nice skewer approach. And what that does is allows the defender to close the gap on the offensive player earlier and alter more shots and passes. And just notice it's a simple lead with stick here. Get to the hands. You don't have to do anything else other than just have your stick out in front for it. The next example here is Maryland doing it against Penn State. And we'll see the skip pass here, right here. Boom. Lead with the stick. And even though he slightly overruns the approach, just having that stick out in front skewers through Matt O'Keefe's hands here and takes his top hand off the stick. Even though we kind of have a bad approach, it buys that extra time. So just getting in the habit of leading with that skewer allows you to disrupt shots earlier, even if you slightly, have a bad approach.
Time. I got you for 103.
Okay, yeah, I was like at 103, 104 on mine when I saw it. I probably could cut some off the end, but yeah, it's this.
That was
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, I think that's, I was actually looking at some of the other approach shooting clips that I broke down this week, and there was one or two where the guy was actually approaching with his stick by his side, and obviously, like we always hear approach with your stick out, etc. I've never even heard of like kind of the technique piece to the different types of approaches, which I think is awesome. But then even to see like the benefits of really getting that stick straight out to try and get to the bottom hand or get to the stick or the chest versus like if you're not there at all, like you're really just, it's like a shooter's dream to use you as a screen.
Yeah, and it's like it's really so great. I think it's so simple. People don't like to focus on it, but like if you think about, a lot of guys like slaps, but a slap is like a one-time thing, right? Like you throw a slap and it happens right then and there, but then you pull the stick back and, a skewer is like a consistent factor. So like by the time you get there, the stick's still there. And so like guys can time up slap checks. Offensive players can run through slap checks, but to run through a skewer, like you have to run through the whole stick. And guess what's at the end of a skewer is the player's hands. So like it allows you to control guys into contact and put like with that Mac O'Keefe example, like as he's running through you, well, a stick's going through his arm also. So like there's a good chance that maybe it takes a hand off the stick or pops the ball out or disrupts something. And like a slap takes your momentum forward, a skewer, like it doesn't take any extra energy forward. You have the same exact footwork. So just getting comfortable with that skewer, it's really, you get used to it. It's really like all benefit, no downside. Whereas a lot of checks have a little bit of a downside at times. There's really not one there, in my opinion.
Now, excuse my ignorance. Would you say like is a skewer kind of a similar idea to like that can opener check where your guys trying to like get in and dig, or is that a little different?
It could be. So like if we look at like it's like if you see like if you're broken down, like a skewer can kind of lead to a can opener, right? And this dude, like the Maryland defender doesn't even try to like can opener, but he just runs
Right.
into it, and O'Keefe's own body momentum of trying to go through it kind of leads to the leverage of the hand popping off. Um, I think that the term can opener is usually a little more intentional of like trying to get your stick in there and pop it out. A skewer kind of just about getting your stick through their hands type of thing. But yeah, if you're under
Right.
control and your stick's through a guy's hands and in between his two hands, like, and you rip it out, like I guess technically it's a can opener, right?
Yeah, it made me think of, like, if you do get it in there and you get in between the hands and then the guy does, like, you know, try to, like, get in and dig, or is that a little different?
Yeah,
take his bottom hand off just to try and reassess and regroup. Like it made me think like that could be a time to not sacrifice position and then, pop that check at the end of the skewer. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and it does. I think where guys get in trouble, honestly, with checks, it's all about the intention behind it. Like the can opener might present itself if you break down and skewer a guy and get in good position. But when guys forget about that part and just go for a can opener, a lot of times they'll sacrifice like that breakdown and positioning piece. So I think it's more the perception around like, the intention behind the check. Like, are you chasing stick? Or like I said, if you break down and play good defense, a lot of times stick's going to show itself. You don't have to go chasing it. So kind of leading with the skewer kind of presents the can opener rather than chasing the can opener.
Yeah, and Matt, it kind of leads me to a less technical question for you, but it's been exciting to watch you really get your training going in Maryland. Matt's training some of the best high school defenders from DC, from Baltimore, and Matt, would there be like, for some of these guys who are really talented, really athletic, there's always the desire to throw these checks. How are you handling that with those guys? And do you feel like, they're kind of like, how are you basically like instilling some of that discipline? Do you think it's constant reinforcement, the film study piece, like what has been, as you've had those conversations with those guys, what's that been like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's unique to the kid. I think, a lot of them, like it's one of their favorite questions to ask, like, okay, Matt, we've done 4 sessions. Like when are we going to go over like some more checks? And like, and then my goal to them, and I think a lot of them, like at that 4 session mark, they're kind of asking, but then after like some more training, they kind of start to get it a little more. Whereas like, if you guys want to throw checks, you have to be in the position to throw it without getting beat. And to be there, you have to have, great feet. You have to have good understanding of your positioning and where you're on the field. It's like, you can throw slap checks if you're in the right spot. But if you try to throw a slap check or a wrap check and you're not set first, there's probably a better chance that that guy runs through your hands and runs through the check, especially as some of these guys, they're starting to cover, Deemer, the best high school attackmen in the country. And they're going to big D1 schools and they're trying to go against the best players in the country. And they know it's not like a random summer tournament where they get to, kind of go chase guys around all the time anymore. So those guys that start to realize that do start to pick up on the, hey, I want to play great defense and I will have my takeaway opportunities. But to get those, they're starting to understand how good footwork, how good body positioning, how good hand positioning and discipline can lead to opportunities to take the ball away from guys or, disrupt passes or ball carriers without sacrificing position heavily.
Love it. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's always a good question. It's fun. It's trying to make defense fun for the guys, but get the right principles and teaching points in there so they can be successful against the players they want to be successful against. All right, so let me get this all set here. So this is going to be, I'm gonna have to run my way through this one. All right, give me a sec. 3, 2, 1. Let's roll. All right, here we're going to go through a clip of some wing defense. All right, so we have Michigan versus Rutgers. I want to talk about these approaches on the wings right here. So we got the first dodge on the wing here. Notice how the short stick drives him down. What I like is just how he gets his hips back upfield on the rollback there and being physical once the guy gets going to where he wants to go. And then we'll see the same thing on this side. He gets over the pick. But as the player goes down the wing, notice he gets that pop right there and gets that stick back upfield to turn him back down. So as we come back here, what I want to highlight is as the ball's going down the field and the player's about to roll back, notice how he gets this pop here and gets physical with the player right here. On the rollback, gets his hands on him and drives him down. That really keeps his momentum going down the field. And we'll see the same thing on this side. When you get a guy going where you want him to go, keep him going by driving him. And those little pushes right there, slow the guy down on his rollback. So it's really hard to roll back with a guy because he knows where he's going and you don't. So when you get a guy going, getting your hands on him and turning him back and getting your hips upfield and being physical allows you to stop guys rather than try to shadow their feet. And I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think I feel that when I'm playing against guys, and like it's just not it's not consistent pressure, so it just catches you off guard at times, and if you're trying to get to the right spot and maybe time up when you want to drop your hips and roll back, like when that throws off balance with that nice well-timed push, it's hard to roll back and like have solid rollback into a shot.
Yeah, and this is one of the harder concepts I think to teach guys. But it's if you can get well-timed pops, um, it can really disrupt an offensive player's ability to dodge the way they want to dodge, right? You can even see right here this Michigan player's body angle, right? You see how he starts to lean back because that to change direction, you have to start angling your body, right? If you ever done like speed work, like learning about like I don't know, shin angles and the body lean and all that to actually get a good breakdown and change direction. What happens is when this guy tries to angle his body back by getting this shove on his hips, his body starts to go upright a little and starts pushing that way. So it takes another step or two to get that actual change. And also, as you're leading in, you're breaking your own momentum down. So as the offensive player starts to stop, well, rather than overrun the play, we do a drill called like the through the window drill, where if you don't use your hands and a guy stops, you go through the window and run right by him. But if you get your hand on that back hip as he stops, you're going to sense him stop and you're going to put pressure on his back hip. So you bring him forward with you and he starts to slow you down as he stops. And so getting his hands on drives him down, but also allows you to keep this. See this angle right here of the Rutgers defender gets his hips back upfield. That's so important on those low wing areas.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I just think like so much to the point of that pop like, really makes it hard to stay. Because again, like if it's more on your back, like and you time it well, you don't have to knock the guy over. You just have to knock him off balance a bit, so you're not getting that push call. You're not getting a huge cross check call, but it's just subtle enough to knock a guy off balance and knock him off his line.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's like guiding a guy's momentum. It's like when a guy's going a direction, like when these guys run down the alley like this, you're okay with him going another 3 yards this way, right? So when you get a guy going a direction, you're okay with him going, give him a little nudge because his momentum's already going there. And his best option at that point is a rollback. So a little nudge takes away his best option. That's the rollback. So you're right. It's not a full arm extended penalty, blow the guy out, but just guide his momentum down. And it just really helps you stay on this like top side shadow of him and take away that quick rollback.
Yeah, for any coaches listening, everyone always says no rollbacks, no rollbacks, right? But here's, extremely useful tip to put into action right away. And even a guy who plays more offensively, like this is something that when I'm stuck on, I can really think about just to keep him from getting back to the middle. And it's really, really smart.
Yeah, and you can do this. I like the wing example, but like there's great examples of pops at X, to keep guys from changing direction. Any spot like where a guy might, change direction, become a threat. It's a good idea if you can get your hands on them just to keep them from running you all over the field.
We might have to get Ty Warner and Will Hawes on here at some point because I feel like those are two pretty elite guys at that tactic.
Dude, Ty, I know Ty's probably swamped in med school right now, but Ty is like one of those guys you watch, and when he gets his hands on you, it's game over. And I think hands are often a forgotten part of defense, where like guys like I have all these guys at training, they play with their stick out in front now because they've heard me say it a million times, or somebody said it to them a million times, and their feet are getting better, but they run next to guys and the guy will be like a yard away from you. I'll start to close the gap and they'll just kind of like stay right next to him. And you watch a lot of these guys at high levels. When a guy starts to get within like Ty Warner's like personal space, like his hands come out and there's like shoves and like turns and holds and all this stuff. And actually, we have a good clip broken down of Ty Warner covering Connor Fields in college. We have it on the platform now. We might have to reference that one because he does a phenomenal job covering Connor Fields, who's an elite dodging attackman as a short stick. And a lot of that is, getting his hands on him and turning him back.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss the chance to go against him. I had a couple of good battles with him in the Whips Chaos. What was the first round game in Ohio, or semifinal maybe, um, in Ohio for the first year of the PLL. And I just remember too, like you really have to do a lot of things right just to get off a quality shot, and then
Yeah.
not only that, but then you get Kyle in the cage. So it's just, you got to really string together a lot of nice movements to, get a clean look and stick one.
Dude, yeah, he's impressive, man. Like it's like I've been spoiled playing with good D mids because those guys are good, man. They're physical. Like the best defenders are the best defenders at pro collegiate level. They're like strategically physical where they don't get a ton of penalties, but you have to be able to, drive guys off their line a little bit and stay balanced and use your hands well in combination with your feet. It's like, like an offensive lineman, he kicks backs, but as he kicks backs, he punches his hands out at the same time. Type of deal. Just getting that combination down is huge. All right. Yeah. So this one, Deemer, let's do it together with no dry run. Let's see if we can hit it in a minute. You've seen the clip, the topic. I don't know how our cadence is going to be, but we got a transfer through X clip coming up. So I don't know how it's going to go, but let's see what we can get in a minute. And this is no timer on yet, but as a preface, we last week in particular, we looked at how Maryland played Penn State and forced them to low angles and then showed a lot from X. And it worked out well for Maryland. Now we've seen other teams throughout the year use different strategies where they help from X or they press out from X, and some teams transfer the ball well through X, and it's worked out or it hasn't worked out. And so it's a really interesting kind of concept of how teams can attack that. So we're just going to look at a quick clip here from the Penn State Rutgers game. All right, Dean, ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. I'll let the clip play through here. Just gave the preface, but here we got Penn State going down the side. Rutgers shows off the X attackman. Penn State transfers it through and gets a shot. Deemer, what are our first impressions here?
I think it's a great job on the initial rollback to get the stick back to the middle and make the defender really commit. That's important because then when we push it forward, number 7 is tight to the crease. He's immediately a threat and then can push the 2-on-1 on the backside.
Love that. That's a good point. And being able to get the stick to the inside hand, but still be able to get the pass off, because we saw it a couple times last week, him get caught in here. Now, what I like from number 7 back here is he stays within a passing lane while pushing it up. The thing I'm going to call out is this X defender fully commits, and then the roll off the backside wing here. What I would do is keep this backside wing wide, slow play it from the crease here, and recover this guy to the crease, because this guy's more of a threat. This is a shorter recovery slide. This guy's not in the play. So you want to slow play it to this X guy, stay on the threat here, have this guy try to split 2 and have this guy recover to the crease before they can swing it through the backside and get that step down, because that backside swing through is the most dangerous piece here.
109, 108, not bad.
Yeah, we'll cut out one of our parts. It's hard because there's actually in an 8-second clip, there's kind of a lot to unpack here, right?
There really is. The other thing I was going to talk about too, if you rewind it, go to the very beginning. I love how 33 does a nice job cutting in, and 25 is always such a threat as well. So they both do a great job of occupying their defenders, which in turn occupies the next person in the rotation, because to your point about slow playing, all 3 of those guys high are all occupied. So they're not even seeing number 11 on the wing.
Yeah. And what the point I just made was like, it's Monday morning cornerback type of thing, but we did actually, I remember practices in college sometimes where if you do choose to show and you get caught in the show, because part of the show is you want to hedge and get back, and you don't actually want to commit, but you might have to at times. Like you can't just let this guy come underneath. So if you have to commit, right, you do want to slow play this to X. And we talked about that last week. We posted a breakdown on it, because this guy right now, you don't want to get hung, But if you have to get hung, that's the least dangerous option of these guys above the cage. And my point is that this right now is a long recovery slide for this guy to get across. But if this guy stays wide and this guy inches 2 steps down and 8 here just books it to 33, he probably has a decent shot of getting here by the time this guy can get the goal line extended, or at least make the margin of error so thin that like the Penn State guys like have to make a tough play to get it in there or to turn the corner.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's always the fewer players and the shorter distance you can make a rotation, the better. So rather, if you can go slide, recover, slow play, and leave this guy out there, or maybe he takes one jab step down and gets back, rather than slide, crash down, go out, rotate, you kind of just shorten everything and allow your guys to take up more space and play more lanes and cover more threats with, less bodies and complications moving around.
And hey, not a bad example too to plug shooting with an approach.
Right? Yeah.
Guy kind of gets there, you know what I mean?
Right under, yeah.
To be able to still change the stick head, get off a good release. I think that looks more like a low to low.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways you could shoot that ball from the wing. So you got to quickly choose, avoid the stick. It's a good release.
That is a good release. That's a tough shot, or yeah, it's a tough one to break down on right there, especially flying out like that. But no, I mean, it's just interesting, right? Because if you, at some point, maybe at the end of the year, we can compile a bunch of these of just like these different scenarios of what works through X and what doesn't. One thing I will say is if this guy number 8 right here, he's number 8, can show up enough without getting like, you see how he finally gets caught like almost stuck in there? He could almost maybe like jab up and try to get back and get hung here, easier said than done. But if he can do that, or at least get back to the crease, you can kind of slow down the rotation. But it kind of shows that like the perfect game plan, like you can have the science or logic down, but it is an art to how the players can execute it and how they can kind of take up space and slow play things and all things like that.
Well, I would say too, Matt, if you rewind it, like I feel like kind of always the defensive mentality is like when you do slide to like make the guy pay a little bit and like get the extra pop, but like the ball is already coming out of his stick and he's going to shoot it or he's going to pass it. So it's like to take the extra step to like really move to him. It's like, it's not getting you much,
Yeah. That's actually one of my pet peeves defensively. And look, it's not always the case. Sometimes you can finish with a good hit or a good check, but when you're kind of in between two, and my biggest one is in transition where like you're sliding and a guy or man down and a guy goes to throw it and somebody takes an extra step to get their hands on him, but then you miss out on an opportunity to get back in a passing lane. It's actually the less you can commit and the more like you go boom, like right here, when this guy starts to throw this pass, like you don't want to get like stuck on there.
Right.
Now look, easier said than done. Like that happened fast right there. This dude doesn't know if this guy's crashing in. If he doesn't show to that and he goes under, like that's a problem. So easier said than done. But I agree with you on that concept of in that scenario, it's especially if you see the ball coming out, like you got to realize you got to get back in that play quickly.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. The other thing I'll be curious as we collect more of these and we'll keep coming up with a compilation of them is just at what point is the guy getting under and like how high is that wing dodge? Because I feel like that will really determine how many steps you need to do and show, hey, this is 4 yards above GLE, but what about when he's 12 yards above GLE or 7 yards above GLE? Like, how does it affect that show? And then is he being trailed by a shorty versus a pole? And what are the shooting percentages? Like obviously shooting percentages with stick back to the middle, are well documented that they're higher. So it's just interesting to kind of keep training the mind to like process that and go with like, and play the percentages in real time.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, it's a feel thing, right? You can't obviously calculate all that, but you do have to be able to assess threats and understand opponents. Like watching game film is so important to understand if, hey, is this a guy that is dangerous at scoring down here? Is this a team that plays through X really well? Is this a defender on ball that can handle his own on the island? Or, you know, like all those things matter. Is he coming high enough so that like he has a good angle down the alley? Or is he low enough that I can kind of jab and get back to, you know, top of the crease? There's a lot of considerations there, which kind of makes it so it's not always, you know, showing from X is better versus it's not, or that type of deal, because it really depends on so many things.
Yeah, these are all great points. Hey, I really like the format. I'm curious to hear, what our listeners think. I hope everyone, when you take a listen, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to tweet at us, if you want to, we'll be putting all 5 of these clips on Instagram, and we'll figure out how to best post that for the quick viewing. But we'll have this raw tape up there as well. So Matt, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. I like that format. That was good. I'm interested to see, like, I think the short clips will be good. Um, I do like the format though. I think I think when we fine tune it, we'll get the right topics even more. Like we'll have a lot of nice little clips from it. So really interested to hear what everybody thinks about it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll give Coach Dunn the assist on that one with the 5-and-5 concept idea. So we'll see how that plays out.
Well, I figured 5-and-5 should mean something. I was like,
Hey,
okay,
it's
well,
about the island, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Just work
yeah,
the
well,
up to the
yeah,
five
yeah,
and five spot.
yeah. Post up on the island. Nice, dude. I did like that though.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of, there's just so many games on there. If there's, if any of our listeners ever want to send us some clips, we could use the help for sure. There's a ton of great lacrosse out. We've enjoyed breaking it down. Keep us posted what kind of content's helpful. We're trying to kind of tag team between some Instagram breakdowns, some Twitter threads, the 5-and-5 video podcast stuff. So appreciate all your support. Matt, great job as always, and we'll see you guys next
You
week.
too, buddy. Yep. Looking forward to it.